I love asking people, like we go through every single sense and we ask like what turns you on, what turns you off, what gets you excited, what things do you like to see? I ask about 30 questions within each of our senses. And it's interesting, people will often have a grieving of, I've never been asked this, or I don't know what I like and what I don't like.
Okay, everybody, so excited you're here. It's the perfect month is February, and we have the perfect guest for you who may talk about chocolate and flowers, but this is not our main topic. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Juliana Hauser, which is a licensed marriage and family therapist and a counselor with a PhD in counseling education. She helps women rethink sex, reimagine sexuality and pleasure, define their own sexuality, and reignite their sexy spark in long-term relationships, also maybe after divorce or death. Juliana loves witnessing and supporting her two children as they evolve and grow. And I have to tell you, I just got really nervous talking or introducing you because I know what we're going to talk about, some good stuff. So welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
So we're talking, as you guys heard from the intro, we're talking about sex, and we are not hiding behind the bush. And the first question I want to ask is, which we just talked a little bit before we started the interview, is why is there so much shame talking about sex openly from your point of view and your experience?
hmm I think there is a number of whys, but when we do more of a bird's eye view of it, I think it's just been one of those topics that over generations and thousands of years, we have made sex something that is different, other than, and it is a representation of so many things, of values, of religion, of socialization. And it has become something that, because we all have it in common, it is one of the most divisive parts of who we are as humans. So it should be something that brings us all together, because we all have two things. We all have a body and we all have sexuality. But because we all have it, then we all think, not we, but I think in general, it becomes something that people think they know the right kind of sexuality, which means that there's a wrong kind of sexuality. And when you can put something, when you can bifurcate a part of humanity like that, then I think it becomes something that becomes really divisive, unfortunately. And when it's divisive, and you know that there's a right and a wrong, no one ever thinks they have the right, or they think they know what's right, but they're not sure what they're doing is right. And then we become afraid. We become afraid to say what we're doing is the wrong kind, or we're going to be judged or shamed for it, or what we think what we're doing is wrong.
Because I go back to when I'm German and when I came to the States, and oftentimes it's the shame about our own bodies in the locker rooms. The women would all cover up with towels, and I would just strut around naked, flabby butt and all. And I was like, why are they all covering up? And women got dressed underneath their towels. And been here for 35 years in the States, and women still do that. And I'm always wondering, why are we so ashamed of our bodies?
I know. It's interesting. I had one of my first really freeing experiences with my body in Germany. It was in Baden-Baden, like in a bathhouse, and it was a naked day that both genders, at the time it was just two genders, were everyone was naked, and then we'd meet in the middle, the beginning of it, and I couldn't speak German, and I couldn't understand what they were saying, but they were telling me, like through language, through their hands, that you're to get naked at the locker room and walk through that door. And I remember thinking, please make that not be the gift room. Like, please, like that not be like this gift shop and this. And then feeling and looking at me like, you American, you like, why are all of you Americans so afraid of your body, and like, get over it, just, it's not even, it's, and that was years ago. That's over 40 years ago, 30 years ago. And so why do we feel that way? I think it goes back to as well that we aren't given a lot of role models. And I think women in particular are not given tons of role models as to how to feel comfortable with your body. We hear a whole lot from the women that are raising us or around us as we're being raised, that are self-critical of their own body. I think it becomes part of that socializing as a woman is to criticize your own body. It just becomes it's the polite thing to do almost to not be proud of your body. And a woman who's proud of her body is offensive sometimes to other women. I think that's changing more, but it's still hard. And so when you don't have role models and we of positive acceptance of your body, and then you aren't socialized for that to be acceptable, it makes it really difficult to actually feel it. And I do think there's different standards for those who are identified as women, as to how we are supposed to age with our bodies and how we're supposed to accept it. I have this course called Awaken, and we were doing when I was doing this with another colleague. We're looking at research as to like what do you need? Is it because there are times that I felt like I don't love the word body image. I feel like it's this, I understand the ideal of it, but I don't know how to get to it. How do we love our body? It just saying it over and over again didn't work for me. It didn't make me love my body. In fact, it made me feel worse that I couldn't sit there and feel like I loved my body. So what we actually found was what makes the bigger difference is having body compassion. And again, we're not really taught about body, like just feeling compassion for what our body has been through, feeling compassion for what our body has served us for and why, makes a big difference of feeling comfortable in our own skin, literally.
I love that. This is a way better way to look at it because I feel like that we're taught, look in the mirror and tell yourself you love your boobs, you love your butt. And you go, okay, I'm standing there, I feel like an idiot, first off, and I'm really not feeling that.
Yeah.
So like you described, and I think that the compassionate is a way better way to go also for health in general. Like everybody wants to lose weight, everybody wants to lose body fat and whatever, they go to perky boobs. And it's not, or like you just said too, it's slowly getting into, let's talk about health, let's talk about the well-being around that person.
Hmm.
So what people come to you for help?
I have a wide range of people who come to me and why they come to me. But if we're sticking the topic of sex and sexuality and speaking mostly about those who identify as women, the common denominator is a transition. So it is a woman who is divorced and trying to figure out what that means and who is she post divorce and her identity and what she's wanting when she's starting to date again. It's somebody who is probably going through menopause or has been through menopause, and what does this mean to who she is and how her body has changed and what her sexuality has been. When it's very specifically about sex and sexuality, is typically somebody who is having not having the relationship with her sexuality that she wants, or if she's partnered, that their relationship sexually isn't what they're wanting to have, or she doesn't have a relationship with desire or libido that she wants, or she's having pain during intercourse. I do see a wide range beyond all of that, but that's in keeping to the lane. That's a lot of what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I can see that. You know, as our group is women 50 and I'm going to be 61 this year, 62, excuse me, 62 this year. I can relate to what also sexual intercourse that is painful. And all week we're saying, oh, try lubricants, try hormone replacement, try whatever herb to make things better.
Mhm.
And sometimes these things just don't work, or you go to physical therapy and get pelvic floor therapy and things like that, and that may work, but that may not work either. So I don't think we feel sexy then when we are, as I'm going to get air quotes, we're dried up down there.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so now we're dried up. Our sex drive is going down because of the hormone changes. So then we're like, we can't, another air quote, serve our partner the same sexual desire that we had. What are we going to do? So let's assume scenario. We're in that phase. We still have kids at home because some parents are now older parents.
Mhm.
And you have all this scenario going on.
Mhm.
What do you do?
Mhm. You hit several places that are the great starting points. And that is to check in just physically, to have support physically. But it's not just as simple as getting a doctor. You really want to be have discernment of the kind of doctor that you're looking for. And so I really work with people of how to advocate for yourself. And I practice what I preach. If I'm working with a new physician, I will say in the very first appointment, do you care about my sexual health? And I judge if I'm going to go back based on how they respond to that. And I have some that are horrified, like, nope. If that question alone is hard for you to answer, then that is not who is going to help me to open up to the hard questions, and isn't going to care about helping me problem solve, because it's never just one thing. When someone is having a difficult time in their sexual life, it's just rare that it's one thing. So I need someone to be a problem solver with me. So asking, do you care about my sexual health? If they laugh, that's fine. Like if there's an embarrassment, I'll ask some follow-up questions, and if they're like, absolutely, I care, let's talk about it, then I know that we're going to be buddies and that we're in this together. So that's one thing. And then I like it when I have a medical team that is not just one person, that there are multiple people that they know that they can refer to, they can talk to. And if they have that at their disposal, that's something that's easy for them to either research on their own, or that they can ask other people, then I'm going to stick with them too. So I want you to seek medical help, but I want you to seek the right kind of person who's going to be sex positive, sex affirming, and isn't afraid themselves. Because one of the things I know, because I work with medical schools too, is that the medical community in general are given zero classes on sexuality and sexual health. Even those who specialize OB/GYNs are rarely given any kind of guidance on how to speak to somebody about sexual matters beyond the prescripted of it. So if you want that. And then pelvic floor therapists, I think they are incredible across the board. They not only are they working so much on our physical health, but they are trained in a way of what I call agency. So they are trained to help their patients have agency over their experience, which is incredibly healing and powerful. And I have seen, although that physically what they're doing is really powerful, I have seen my clients get even more healing from the way that they're being treated in their sessions, even more so than what they're physically doing with them. Because it's the first time someone is letting them be in charge of their own sexual health, and it's someone who's in it with them. And that alone is a different and corrective experience. Then there's the psychological aspect of it that everyone is having to go in. We are walking into our menopausal years, for a lot of us, with some kinds of baggage, relationship baggage, how we feel about our body baggage, the way that society doesn't allow us to age in a sexy way and an affirming way. We have all of that. And if we're partnered, our partner's going to have all of those things too. And we're just magically supposed to have great sex after all that. Because, a lot of times when I work with a lot of couples too, their desire, pain, and having everything work together has so much to do with how the relationship outside of sexual context is going to. And while we're aging, we're talking about drying and pain during intercourse. That's also next to, if depending on the age of our partner, if our partner is in a similar age group, our partner's having that kind of age, whether it's a woman or a man, it's also aging, and things aren't working the same, and they're feeling different about themselves. So if we're not supported about our sexuality in our 40 and younger, we are definitely not supported in our sexuality 40. In my view, sensuality
So why
is an aspect of
why is
holistic
sensuality
sexuality,
and pleasure
and it's one of the
important in
best places to
relationship?
begin. Because so sensuality for
if
me,
you are
it
in
was
if you were
really
in
a game
touch
changer
with your senses,
and me
even just one of
understanding
them.
that sexuality was something that was really important to understand. And it took me a bit to understand the difference. I'm so glad you asked that question, because a lot of people interchange the two, and they're different. You have to be present in order to experience that, so that the joy you hear with a song that you love, you are in the moment. When you smell a flower that is just incredible to you, when you're in that moment, you are in touch with the essence of who you are. When you're present minded, you are really grounded in that, even if it's a nanosecond. When you are in touch with who you are, your essence, then you are able to connect with somebody authentically, assuming that they're doing the same. So sensuality allows you to be very micro in the connection, as well as being very macro. So macro in the essence connection possibility, and micro in the joyfulness that you can have in those senses. And not everybody has the same access to all of our senses, but we have preferences, and I love it. I have a part of the course that I do called Revealed. Sensuality is the first module that we go through, and I love asking people, like, we go through every single sense and we ask, like, what turns you on, what turns you off, what gets you excited, what things do you like to see. And I ask about 30 questions within each of our senses. And it's interesting, people will often have a grieving of, I've never been asked this, or I don't know what I like and what I don't like. But quickly that grieving will move to excitement. And
Mhm.
it's a place, because to me, I think desire and I think our sexuality is really stoked by our vibrancy. And vibrancy can get lost as we go through life, and as life gets harder and we hit through those kind of places. Vibrancy is a catalyst to bring back that feeling, like you're talking about, the spark, pursuing the spark. And I think sensuality is a way to pursue your spark as well.
Yeah, that's why I love when I read about you bring the sexy back or the sexy spark back. I'm like, this is perfect for our podcast.
Yes.
And these are good things to talk about because I feel and I know that many women don't talk about what they may want. And you see, of course, in the sexier movies, I'm not talking porn, but just the sexier movies where the guy's like, so what do you want?
Mhm.
And you can feel the woman freezing on the other end going, I have no idea. I don't know. What should I do? What shouldn't I do? Or what should I want? Does it come as or would you find out about this? Or a good way to find out about this is to explore your own body, maybe through self-touch and masturbation?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's so many benefits to self-pleasure, and I call it self-pleasure instead of masturbation. But there's so many benefits to it. And one of which is to know yourself and to not think that, like, like, let's say you just know you love this one move and you love this one thing, that's not going to change. And so often in our aging process, we start looking at our body as breaking or being broken. And I like to look at it more as changing. And yes, there's a loss to that, but there's also a gain to it as well. And so if you have the belief that you are going to always be a student of who you are, and that means your mind and your soul and your body, then let's get curious about how our body is changing and where has our pleasure changed to. And some of that pleasure is more accessible as we age. Some of it may not be, but it's not that we are losing everything and it is gone forever. We can find different ways, and self pleasure is one of those. And it can be, you can examine that through with your hand or with toys. There's so many things that we can change. So I was a part of this community called Body Sex that is really focused on self pleasure and understanding yourself and having very frank conversations about how people self pleasure. And it was fascinating to me that at this point, and this is different, this is still, we're even talking like even just 10 years ago, that there were so many even techniques and positions of self pleasure that had never occurred to me that I could try or that could be a part of. And so I find it also self pleasure, if we're going to talk about sexuality being difficult to talk about, self pleasure is the almost the highest on the list of what people have a hard time saying. So if I was to say, so how what is your position when you self pleasure? That to most people would be mortifying to say, oh, I go on my belly and I do it this way, or and someone else is like, on your belly? How in the world do you do this on your belly? Someone else is like, I hang from a door. Hang from a door? How do you even do that? Or I use a jacuzzi jet. I wish we could share more easily details of how we have found pleasure on our bodies. But that does seem to be a place that's difficult and that you want to find those trusted few. But gratefully, we are in an era that there's a lot of this is more at our disposal, that we can read articles or books that give us those kinds of details. And I hope we can translate that to our friendships and to the trusted people in our life, that we can share that. I also love, I was saying this earlier, like when a client will transition to a different comfort level in talking about self-pleasure, I will love it when a client will say, this feels so weird to say, Dr. Juliana, but I thought about you when I not fantasized about me, but like, I thought you'd be so proud of me that I was talking to my friend about self-pleasure. And it is true. It's a healthy thing to own. I want to have pleasure in my body. And it's a healthy thing to ask somebody else, um, so what's working for you? How we can learn so much more from each other, and we shouldn't feel so ashamed that our body can feel pleasure and that we want to feel pleasure with it.
Yeah. With that, what you said, the first thing that came to mind is the Kama Sutra.
Mhm.
That's what people are like, oh, I can't do all these poses. And should I do these poses? This is kind of weird. I almost self-expose myself with doing something not routine,
Yes. Hmm.
right?
Yes.
And so we don't have to go, you don't have to go out and buy the Kama Sutra now, but you definitely can reach out to Dr. Juliana and get some ideas and tips, and maybe take one of her courses if you need help with this.
Mhm.
So as we're thinking, okay, so now the kids are moved out, we are now by ourselves, we can romp around the house all we want, but we may have not had sex for years because of just being
Mhm.
tired, kids, stress, who knows, work, whatever it is, but it just never happened, and all the physical, mental, medical problems that come with this. Where do you start to reconnect if you have that physical, the sexual, like I'm talking intercourse, if you have not had intercourse and you're like, okay, I'm committed, I'm gonna go back there. How do you if you see us laughing, I'm like, you got to watch our video, we're awesome. And you have to see Dr. Juliana's background. She's all little sexy kisses on her wall behind her.
Yes. So what do you do? Again, like it's never just one thing. But I like to go at it as um, we want to have the attitude of curiosity. And that if you have an attitude of curiosity, then nothing's a mistake. Nothing is really off limits, and a no is just as wonderful as a yes. And when you can have that attitude, looking at exploring who you are now, and if you're partnered, who you two are together, then it loosens up some of the rules. Because that's part of the problem too, is that we have so many rules and shoulds to it, that when you're at this phase in life, let's be done with that, and let's be free, and have the joyfulness of aging, that we get to kind of make our own rules and have our own agency as to what this is. And so I like working with people first on loosening up expectations, and having it to go like a lot of people, like they just kind of come at it as like, it has to go like this, or it should be, I'm running around naked now that the kids are around, but I really don't want to do that. I think that's kind of gross or weird, or I don't feel good. But so you don't have to run around naked. That everyone gets to have their own definition of what their sexuality is at any point in their life, but particularly when you're at that phase. So, and that can be self-imposed on, even more than anything else, that we self-impose these rules onto ourselves. Then the next thing is sometimes it's like, okay, we got the attitude right, but we don't even know what are our options. Like, it's been so long, I don't even know how this works. And looking at different, so going back to our senses, my favorite sense to work with people at first is touch. And I teach, there's 4 different kinds of touch. It comes from Tantra. It's a very basic way of looking at it, but it's what kind of touch do you like on your skin to receive? What kind of touch do you like to give to somebody else? And are those 4, do you have different preferences depending on where it is on your body? And when you go, this is kind of tied into another kind of sex therapy technique called sensate therapy, that you're looking at communicating with each other through touch and through connection in that way. Because it can be very intimate to sit with somebody and massage each other's hands, knowing that there's nothing else on the table, no sex, penetrative sex on the table, but you haven't really spoken and looked at each other like this alone in a quiet house in a very long time. And all of a sudden, 2 minutes feels like 30. And then you feel bad and you feel disconnected and it feels awful. So you have to have support in that process of how do you kind of go back to that. So I like sensate therapy, and I like touch as a way to reconnect. And I also like doing this exercise that I didn't come up with. It's just been out there for many, many years. And it's I call it the 4 quadrant exercise. And it's very easy to do. You can look on my website. I have it on there for free, but you can do it yourself. You just take a piece of paper and make 4 quadrants, or vertical and a horizontal line. And the 4 quadrants are things that I have done sexually that I would do again, things that I've done, like sex acts that I've done that I don't think I want to try again, sex acts that I haven't tried that I'm interested in trying, or at least I think I am, and sex acts that I haven't tried that I think are pretty much off the table. And then you have these 4 quadrants, and then you have a whole list. And I have a list that you can start with on my website, or you can Google sex acts. Although, if you're afraid of that, it could open Pandora's box if you're not used to it. Or you can just come up with sex acts yourself. But they need to be everything from like having somebody kiss your hand, so that feels like kind of benign, to as wild as you can think of. And you want to have a list of at least 50 sex acts, and because you want to have at least 10 in each of the categories. And then you start doing it, you start deciding, and you don't hold yourself to it forever. It's how that day, how you're feeling about this. And you do it separate. If you're partnered, you do it alone. You don't do it with each other. And then you get back with each other and you start sharing it in an atmosphere of safety and non-judgment. And it's fascinating. It's a really lovely exercise. I love watching couples go through it, because they'll be surprised how many things that they both want to do that they haven't been doing. Like, we could have been doing this all along, or you don't want to do this anymore either. And I only did it because I thought you liked it. And your partner's like, no, I'd rather stop too. And it's a way to start getting really honest with yourself and with each other. And the places where you find that you want to, where I often like to them to start, is the quadrant where you haven't tried it, but you think you want to try it, are some of the best places to have that vibrancy come again, especially if you have the attitude of curiosity. That if you try it, like, sex is weird. It's just a weird, messy kind of thing in general. It's beautiful and wonderful when everything's working right, but even then, like all the liquids and all the things that are in the sounds, it's just an odd experience. um and so we want to look at it like that too. Like, let's have a lightness about trying this again. Let's give ourselves grace that it's going to be clunky, and that's not a failure. We're trying, and we're trying to connect. And let's look at this as pleasure. What is our pleasure journey with each other, instead of it having to be this pressure and orgasm?
Yeah, this is a good, like, let's take a breath.
Yeah.
I think many women feel pressured to have an orgasm. And when I did some more research for our episode, I came across many articles or people that have been interviewed, and they say, well, men, I faked my orgasm because I think I should have one. Or the next person says, I never had one. I don't even know what that feels like. The next person said, my husband is done and I'm way from being done. So there's like all these things that we don't know about our bodies, and don't know. Like I said, the one person, like, I have no idea what an orgasm feels like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So how can you communicate with your partner when you don't know what that feels like, or where to even find how to get it? And I compared it on a very basic level with Pilates. When my Pilates clients come in, I say, okay, navel to spine. And they're like, mm-hmm. Like, can you feel your core engaging, and can you feel that bowl that you're creating? Mm-hmm. And I was like, I know they have no clue what I'm talking about.
That's a really good example. That is exactly, and it's because if you don't have a body mind connection, or you don't know how to even begin that, then it's a different language that you're being asked to speak, and it feels like everyone else has the secret but you. And that feels, and then that adds to your original question, which is the shame and how hard it is to talk about. And so if you don't even have the verbiage to describe what you're speaking of, like when you're doing the bullet, like I maybe I'm feeling it. I'm trying, and that is the same with orgasm and pleasure, and especially for women too. And there's so much pressure for women to perform, to please, even with the verbiage of like some they're heterosexually partnered. Like I'm gonna make her come. I'm gonna make her have an orgasm, and no, that's not the way we talk about that now. That's not going to help anything. It's in some ways, the female orgasm has been characterized as a performance review for a man. And that is a shame that that has happened over the years. And we're all trying to deconstruct that. And I actually even work with women on how to say, what do you do when you haven't, if you want to have orgasm and your partner's already orgasmed, or whatever they're doing isn't working, what do you say at those times? How do you have those kind of awkward conversations that is still empowering for yourself, and getting what your needs are, but without shaming or creating a fight, or disagreement within sexual connection? I think those are pretty lonely arguments when an argument begins during sexual connection, and it happens quite a bit for us, like people getting frustrated with each other.
Yeah, and that brings me back to like, how do you build a meaningful relationship around this when you have, and let's tie that in a little bit, when you have different desires. The one person is horny all the time, and the other person occasionally is like a lukewarm.
Mhm.
How do you build bridges for that?
Mhm. It's difficult, and I think it's a very hopeless place for a lot of people when there's a desire mismatch, and particularly if it's well, it's actually any gender that I've seen that they feel when you're the one that has the lower, quote, lower amount of desire, then you're often looked at as the problem, and you are the reason why the other person has their pleasure and their sexual life withheld from them. And that creates lots of resentment outside of sexual connection as well. So what do you do? It's some of the answers are similar, because it's never just a one pronged thing. And you want to first deconstruct what it means to have a relationship with desire. So kind of like with masturbation, I don't use that word. I don't use the word libido. I like to use the word desire, and I have a feeling you do too. I We have to just learn it. We have to relearn what desire means, and we have to, like, most of us were given horrible sex education growing up. And if you're given any, I've never come across anybody who is 30 on up who had the word libido desire mentioned at all. And so we weren't prepared for our desire to change ever in our lifespan or in relationships. So again, we look at it, there's a right and there's a wrong in our sexuality, and a right and a wrong in our desire in this relationship. So we have to release the pressure of it, because you're never going to change desire by forcing it ever. And even like when I work with some women who are exhausted, you have to figure out how to make sex a better option than sleeping. And so you're wanting to have sexual connection that is going to be worth the loss of sleep for it. And that could be a hard sell if someone isn't good in bed, if they don't have techniques that are good, that you've kind of given up on, but you're committed to them, or they want different kinds of sex than you do. And so you have to start really having some honest discussions about what do you want and what do you need and what works and what doesn't. And all of that's combined with self-pleasure. It's with having agency. It is having good communication and really knowing yourself. It's a lonely place when you often when you have inauthenticity in your sexual connection.
Mhm.
I've had a lot of people say, I've been faking it for so long. I have no idea how to start telling, like, but I figured out how to have an orgasm on my own, but now I don't know how to tell him how to do it. Or like my real orgasm really sounds different than the one I've been faking it. So how do I transition, through that? And I think it's a risk, and it's a real vulnerability to be honest about who you are as a sexual being. And not all relationships have created a foundation for that. But truly begins with yourself too. Some of the hardest conversations are being honest with yourself
Mhm.
about what you need and what you want and what your yeses and what your nos are.
Yeah, it's, we always think everything starts with a why.
Yes. Yeah.
Include, I mean, in your business, in my business, it's all the why, and that's where most people, women, don't want to look. They don't want to reveal themselves, and they want to dig deep because there's so much hurt, resentment, and emotions there that they may not want to face. And I always say, I talk about them. It includes me too. I sometimes go, "Oop, I'm not going to talk about. I'm not going to touch this with a pole until I'm ready for that." And
Yeah.
sex is that as well.
Absolutely.
When we talk sex, the first thing that comes to mind is intercourse. I would say in 90% of the people. But there's also other like what you call the gateway to more.
Yes.
Gateway to more has nothing to do with intercourse.
Yes. Yes. And there's a forgotten parts of our sexuality, and pleasure pathways, as well. And it's interesting too, like when I talk to people, about like oral sex, like, so what do you like and what do you not like about it? Again, like talking about like self pleasure, oral sex seems to be something that also has a different set of like, I'm not supposed to talk about this, and that the words that we use to describe it also feel icky or impolite, or they don't want to admit that they've done this, or they have felt that's not what like good girls do, or that's not, what, you should do at this certain age, or whatever. And so we just have to examine, what are those shoulds, what are those messages. And I like doing this exercise. It's similar to like decluttering a closet, but we declutter our sexual messages. And oral sex and the other sex acts outside of penetration, are often, we have lots of messages that we were given about those things. So we have to decide, do I think this is true or not? And one of the things that I think can be misunderstood, when the work that I do, is that my belief system is not that everybody should do everything, and that if you do everything, that means that you are sexually free and have sexual agency. I don't think that at all. I think it is powerful to say, this is not a sex act that I'm interested in doing right now. That is a beautiful and an absolute place that you get to be in, and that's why it's agency. You get to decide your yeses and nos. It can be tricky if your yeses and nos are different with your partner, or if your yeses or nos feel like they're different than the norm. But I can tell you, I have a lot of private conversations in my work, and I get to hear a lot of people's secrets and a lot of people's desires, and there's not a lot that's not normal at this point. I hear a lot. So if you think what you're interested in doing, what you're doing is different than most people, you're probably not doing anything that's different in that way, frankly. People just don't share. And they don't have a lot of safe places to share too. But also asking, like, I think too, like, I love teaching couples, how to have an evening of sexual connection that, going into it, is not going to be about penetrative sex. Those can be some of the most fulfilling, exchanges of intimacy that you have. And also, if, for instance, if you're partnered, with somebody that, has a penis, and it's not working how it typically would, there's sex toys that you can use, or there's other ways that you can find pleasure without that kind of performance too, because men have a pressure to perform just as much as women do. It's just different, and it's just socialized differently too. And I have a lot of men that I work with also, and I think that they are underserved just as much as women are about having a safe space to talk about sex. So that's the other thing. If you're partnered with a man, don't underestimate his interests in learning how to do things differently and wanting to have a space to say yes and no also to sex acts as well.
There you go, giving each other the permission to speak freely and
Mhm.
get away from those norms, like you said. Because then again, when you think about Viagra, the commercials we see or the funny scenes in movies,
Mhm.
I'm sure have nothing to do with what you're seeing or hearing with your clients, other than what that slapstick was or that movie thing over there.
Yes.
So, and I know
Mhm.
that these can be difficult conversations, but also I'm curious of what do you think the benefits are of having a healthy, sparkly sex life inside and outside the bedroom?
Yes, I love this question. So it's I have a little bit of a runway to get to the answer to it, and I'll start with this. I I never understood growing up, and I'll say that up until like I'll say growing up until my third, like until I was like in my 30s, as like what was the deal with sex? Meaning, is I didn't understand it to be that it could be something bigger than just a sex act or bigger than just an orgasm. And I'm not abnormal. There's a lot of people that that's all we're taught that, what it is. But I just kept feeling that there was something more to it. And again, like I started off as a kindergarten teacher. I'm such an unlikely person to have ended where I am in my career, except for I couldn't get away from the fact that how people showed up as their sexual self to somebody else was unique. And that if you had a discomfort with who you are and you had to use alcohol in order to show up sexually or to feel free, but you didn't have to do that in other hard and awkward situations, why was sex always just so different? So I started asking questions, and then ultimately became part of my education. I started doing it in my research, and I never was afraid to ask people these questions, and I started getting a pretty clear picture that sexuality is the final frontier of self-development. It's the final place. Like we do there's a lot of pathways to figure out who we are. And a lot of times that's what people believe is like our human mission is to figure out who we are. But I also think that's coupled with we humans just want to connect. We are wired to connect with other people. And if you put the two together, if you put your sexual self and connection together, and that can be truly within sex acts, but it also can be soul to soul. That's when it all came together for me, which is it's a skill to learn the truth of who you are, to really understand the essence of who you are. That's a skill. It's a skill also to learn this lifelong that you once you know yourself, it doesn't stop because we don't stop evolving and changing in the essence of who we are. We may have some constants in our essence, but it's still changing depending on what happens in our life and how we interpret what happens in our life. So we have to keep getting to know that, like our sexuality, our essence and our sexuality are fluid. So we have to keep figuring out who that. So as you figure out who you are as a sexual being, you are also figuring out who you are as a human in general. And as you're doing this self discovery, that means you get to authentically show up to people and connect in a way that you feel seen and heard and valued. And when you feel those things, especially when you feel all three from somebody, which is what you want in a partnership, is to feel like you are seen and understood and that they really care and think you're worthy and want you. When you get that all three, whoa, is that magical and fabulous and hard to maintain and important to maintain, that then there's this synergy of that's the kind of relationships you want to have. And it's difficult to show up in the truth of who we are sexually. It's difficult to show up to a sexual connection with somebody authentically. But when you do, those are the kind of sexual connections that are transcendent. Those are, and sometimes that's orgasmic also, but sometimes it's not. It's this beautiful exchange that we can have, whether it's a one night stand or your love partner of 40 years. And when we share ourselves authentically and sexually with somebody, it's an expression of our essence, it's an expression of us. And that's why I think it's really important. And that's why I think it's important for us to take the time to see that our sexuality is more than the sex that we're having. And it's important to know who that is. And when I decided, I had like 10 pillars of sexuality, holistic sexuality, that I came up with through the work of just putting all the kind of theories together. I realized it was also us. It wasn't just sexuality. It was who we are in general. And that saying, what happens inside the bedroom and outside the bedroom, is just so much deeper than the bumper sticker that it sounds like. And so who we show up as and how we show up in our sexuality means we do that inside and outside of sexual connection. And that's pivotal. And sex is difficult. If we talked about it, it's a hard thing to talk about. So if you can figure out who you are in a topic that has so much shame and difficulty, then you can find that skill in other places too.
Yeah, I agree. When you talked about this connection, whether, it's a one night stand or like, I mentioned in the intro, it could be that your partner has died, that you got a divorce. I think all the things we've talked about are exactly what you could do or explore with a new partner or by yourself. I mean, you don't need anybody to have fun, as I like to call it, sexually. You can just be having a party by yourself and it's great.
Sometimes it's easier because then you don't have to think about somebody else, or you can get it all right and you don't have to teach anybody. Yes.
You have to tell them what you want, how you just do it. You go right at it. I'm a big yes, I'm all yes for that.
Me too.
But one of the things that came to mind when you just spoke was that I'm an Argentine tango dancer, and this is how I met my husband. And in tango, people are looking for the 3 or 4 minute romance. A song is 3 to 4 minutes long. And when you dance with a partner and you have that emotional connection during those 3 or 4 minutes, it's mind blowing. And we've been dancing for a long time. And I've had this once with my husband after a long, long time of dancing together. But I had it at a dance where we just danced with whoever we were dancing. And I danced with this guy, and it was unfreaking believable. And all we did is we moved, we breathed, we didn't even look at each other. It was incredible. So the 3 or 4 minute romance in Argentine tango is something that many tango dancers are looking for. This is their drive to go dancing, not just, oh, I got exercise and I met my friends. It's that little bit of extra. And many people don't think about when it comes to dance or sexuality.
That is so beautiful. That is exactly what I'm talking about with this too, because there has to be truth in that exchange, and there has to be willingness to share and to accept, and that just the energy flow that was happening. I mean, I could feel it the way you were describing it.
Woo, it was really like, woo.
Yes.
When the song ended, you were just looking at each other and we said, thank you. We stepped away from each other. It was like a daze.
Yes.
It was incredible.
That's great.
So with that said, what would you tell our listener as maybe not as a homework, but final words about it's Valentine's Day this week and we're here and hopefully everybody's listening to this. What would you tell them?
I would say find a place that is between a nudge and a shove, of something that you have wanted to try, something that you've wanted to do differently, something that makes you a little bit nervous, but not afraid. Something that can feel like a spark and some vibrancy, and go for it. Try it. Try it with yourself. If your partner, try it with your partner, and release yourself from the expectations of what it is that you think you're going to feel from it, so that it has room to have a life of its own. And that seems to me like the example that you gave is that you go in with not this huge tie to the expectation of what it's going to be. And sometimes those surprises are the most transcendent moments. And look for them outside of the expected way that we often look at what should be happening on Valentine's Day or Valentine's week or whatever. And I have found that vibrancy and spark is just as contagious and as some of the negative things in our life. So we should really be spending more time on the positive, on those little small blissful places in our life, whether it's our body pleasure, our mind pleasure, our soul pleasure.
Yeah. So how can people reach out and connect with you, Juliana?
So I'm on all social media platforms as Dr. Juliana Hauser. My website is Dr. Juliana with one N, and then my email is Dr. Juliana Hauser at gmail.com. And we're really responsive, typically, unless I'm really busy. And I love hearing from people. And I love connecting, and I work with people one on one and work with couples in my private practice with people all over the world. And I do everything virtually and have for a very long time. And then I have courses where people can take courses from me. And I have this course revealed that I even have facilitators. We're in 8, almost 11 countries now, and spoken in many different languages.
And you also are gender open.
Yes.
Uh,
Mhm.
it's like whatever gender you are or identify with, this is the place to go to get answers when it comes to sexuality.
That's right. Yep. I work with all genders, all orientations, all ages.
Yeah,
Yes, an inclusive community.
I love that a lot. So, Juliana, so glad you came on the show, and I appreciate all the wisdom you shared and all the sexy sparks you shared.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for being brave to bring this topic onto your podcast.
Oh, I appreciate you. So, everybody who is listening, pass on this episode to your friends, to your family, anybody else you think they need to hear this, because many of us need to hear this. And you please reach out to us on social media. You know, I'm at Heike Yates on Instagram, Heike Yates Pursue Your Spark on Facebook. And that's just like Dr. Juliana. I'm everywhere under Heike Yates. We want to have a conversation. This is not just Juliana and I have a conversation, and she teaches you about what to do in and outside the bedroom. But we want to know your questions. We want to connect, reach out to us. And if you don't like to speak on social, email us and ask the questions that you may be too embarrassed to ask. But follow us, connect with us, and we hope to hear from you. And with that, I think both of us, we can only say happy Valentine's.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Bye.